no, no, no.
In this movie, a mysterious force spreads across the globe, causing anyone who comes in contact with it or sees it to visit their worst nightmare, turning them into a psychopath, and the individual self-deletes. The movie begins with Malorie, a mother of 2 children, whom she calls girl and boy because the world is so meaningless now, and she can't come up with a name. She tells the kids about a dangerous journey they would have to embark on while being blindfolded. They have to make it across a river where they've built a shelter for the survivors, and she warns them to never take off their blindfolds, no matter the circumstance, after which they tie a wrap of cloth around their face to prevent them from seeing what's known as the presence, and they leave on a boat. The movie then takes us back to 5 years ago, on how it all began. Malorie was pregnant during that period, and she was so passionate about her career as an artist that her sister, Jessica, finds it absurd that she hardly goes outside to socialize or do anything, to the extent where she has almost no food left and wasn't in the mood to step out and get some groceries. Jessica tells her about how the stores are crowded with people, and a lot of them are packing up food. Malorie had no idea what she was talking about, and Jessica asks her to turn on the news to a broadcast that reports about chaos around Europe and Russia, and people are trying to get out of the country, but every medium of transportation has stopped working. Eyewitnesses share that thousands of people have killed themselves, and according to scientists, this is not due to any poor environmental situation or low standard of living. Malorie doesn't care because it's happening outside of America, and she thinks she has nothing to worry about. Jessica wants them to go for a show that evening, and Malorie declines, reminding her that she has an appointment to go see a doctor that day. Hearing this, Jessica gets so excited and decides to go with her to the hospital. During the ultrasound scan, the doctor wants to reveal the gender of the child, and Malorie says she doesn't want to know and would be excited if it comes as a surprise. Once she's done, she walks through the hallway to meet her sister when a lady suddenly turns to the huge glass in front of her and begins smashing her head onto it, not minding the damage. Seeing this, Malorie quickly runs to the car where her sister has been waiting and asks her to drive. She theorizes that whatever was happening in Russia has finally entered America, and they need to drive fast to safety. Jessica wants them to take shelter in her apartment, as she considers it safe and has enough food to sustain for a period of time. Everywhere across the city, people are starting to act crazy, and road users don't mind safety rules anymore. Jessica's phone starts to ring, and Malorie tries to get it for her. As she leans forward to reach and gets back, Jessica begins to hallucinate, and her eyes morphs into that of a monster. Malorie asks her sister what she saw, but doesn't say anything and keeps driving recklessly. Malorie manages to grab the wheel, only for Jessica to drive straight into a parked vehicle, and the car they are in flips over and crashes. Both of them manage to survive, but Malorie watches as her sister moves onto a coming truck and stands in front of it, only to get rammed and crushed to death in the process. Malorie is in a state of panic and doesn't know she's standing in the middle of the road as she watches people running around, even abandoning their kids, until a lady helps move her to the other side. At that moment, she begins to follow the crowd to run in the same direction, only to get pushed down, and she falls to the ground. A lady sees her and tries to help, even when her husband tries to stop her. Ignoring him, she offers to help Malorie because of her condition, only for her to see the presence and starts hallucinating, calling out to her mom who passed away years ago. Everyone watches helplessly as she enters a burning car that explodes afterwards. A man sees Malorie and tells her to keep her eyes down, and together they make it to a shelter. Although the old man doesn't want to let them in, the owner of the shelter says he has to help and opens the door for them to come in, alongside a police lady. The old man points his gun at Malorie, wanting to kill her because he blames her for the death of his wife. Malorie apologizes, and as everyone tries looking for clues to understand what is happening, the news reports that the pandemic is rapidly spreading across the world, and the president have ordered a state of emergency, instructing everyone to remain indoors until they've come up with a solution. Everyone is in a state of panic, and they talk about how they lost their loved ones. Charlie, a supermarket worker, shares his theory on what's going on as the end of the world. He speculates that different religions have written books calling out what's happening today as the end of the world, and he was writing his own book on it before the incident. Tom, a construction worker, also suggests that since people get infected by looking at the presence, they must lock all the windows and make sure no one gets to look outside. Soon, a voice of a lady is heard outside, knocking on the door and begging to be let in. Most of the people in the shelter don't want to open the door, scared that the lady might be one of the infected. Malorie picks up a gun, ready to shoot, but Tom insists and opens the door. Everyone has to close or cover their eyes just in case, and the lady is allowed inside with a blindfold. After confirming that she isn't infected, Malorie lowers her gun, noticing she's pregnant, just like her. The old man says the shelter has become a maternity ward because now it's obvious that the food supply won't be enough for everyone in the coming days. They have to look for a way to get to a supermarket to get some food. The owner of the shelter suggests that since the presence only affects people that look at it with their naked eyes, maybe looking at it through the camera lenses won't affect them. Everyone thinks this is a bad idea, but because there's no other option, they have to test it. The man asks to be tied to a chair and given the remote controller of the CCTV while everyone goes downstairs to wait for feedback. Meanwhile, a teenager tries to hit on a girl, considering it's the end of the world anyway, but she rejects him. Upstairs, the guy sees a shadowy figure moving around the front yard, and as he stares, his eyes suddenly change. He gets aggressive, everyone can hear the rumbling noise so they rush upstairs to see what's going on. Before anyone could reach him, Greg manages to self-delete by knocking his head on concrete. The next day, they've run out of food and supplies, so they have to come up with a solution if they will survive. Charlie, who was a supermarket attendant before the outbreak, tells everyone that he has the keys to the supermarket because he was the one who locked it before the outbreak. So they start picking people who would go on the first run. Charlie, Malorie, the old man, and the academy police lady decide they would go first, so he tells everyone to gather tools they would use to cover the windows of the car. Thankfully, the car has a GPS sensor that helps them navigate, even telling them when there's an obstacle blocking their way. As the presence begins to surround the vehicle, Charlie tries to exit the car, not realizing it was a stupid idea for that current situation. But everyone joins hands to calm him down, and finally, they make it to the supermarket. Everyone wears their blindfolds, and Charlie manages to open the door to the supermarket. As soon as they get in, Tom rushes to cover up the windows before instructing them to take off their blindfolds so they can get enough food and supplies they need. As everyone begins to shop for survival necessities, Tom approaches Malorie to show his interest in her. Malorie finds a bird that's still alive and decides to take it. The old man's voice is heard calling everyone to gather around. He's already drunk and starts saying nonsense, like staying in the supermarket since they have enough food to survive with and leaving the rest of the people in the shelter to starve. No one listens to his ramblings, and at that moment, someone begins to knock from a room nearby. As usual, Tom tries to open the door against everyone's protest, but since he's speaking like a normal human, everyone covers their eyes, and the old man readies his gun. Charlie recognizes his voice as one of his colleagues, not noticing the bird's distress. Malorie senses this and tells them there's something wrong. It turns out that he's infected and tries to force his way out of the confinement. Charlie, who's removed his blindfold, witnesses the presence, but before he can be infected, he quickly pushes himself onto his colleague, making both of them fall back into the confinement, sacrificing himself to save the others, but somehow the infected guy was still alive and talking nonsense while the team leaves. As they got back, everyone is sad over the news of Charlie's demise. But at least they have enough food to survive with for months. Malorie and the old man bond over their differences, clearing the fact that the death of his wife wasn't her fault. Now, they both look forward to survival through what the world has become. Unknown to everyone, the teenager and the police academy lady sneaks into the garage. Everyone hears the revving of the engine and rushes to find out what is going on, only to discover that the teenager, alongside the police academy lady, has made away with the SUV. Malorie is in the living room, trying the radio to see if they can get any help. Olympia, the pregnant lady from earlier, opens the door for a stranger to come in. Everyone is furious at how gullible she seems to be, explaining that the stranger was in a state of panic, just like she was before they saved her. Turning to the stranger, Tom asks how he managed to survive and find their shelter. The man then introduces himself as Gary. He was in the train station when everything happened. Although he managed to survive with his colleague in an underground shelter, a group of psychos made it into the shelter and started forcing everyone to look at the mysterious creature. One of them managed to tackle one of the psychos, causing some of them to escape. Since then, he's been knocking on doors until he came across this one. He reveals that these psychos don't wear blindfolds like everyone else. They were happy to look at the creature, and nothing happened to them. The old man thinks he's lying and doesn't believe him. He grabs the shotgun from Malorie and threatens Gary to leave the house. Everyone is against it because Gary doesn't seem to exhibit any symptoms that depict him as a threat. The old man insists and points out that every encounter they've had with outsiders has yielded no positive returns, and this is one of them. Somehow, Grandma was able to sneak up behind him and knocks him out. While unconscious, the old man is taken to the garage and locked up. Olympia apologizes to Malorie, saying she felt the man was in her shoes when he came knocking, and she couldn't stop herself from helping. Explaining that growing up, she never took responsibility for herself and was always taken care of by her parents until she got married. Olympia makes Malorie promise her that whatever happens, she should take care of her kid. The next day, everything seems calm and fine until Olympia starts to contract. The old lady tells Malorie to get some stuff to help her with the delivery. As soon as she goes to get it, her water breaks, indicating that both ladies are about to give birth at the same time. Tom sees this and offers to help her with the process. Using the distraction to his advantage, Gary goes downstairs and opens his bag, revealing a lot of sketches of the monstrosity that turns people into psychos. As he starts drawing a new sketch, Malorie successfully gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Gary hears the cries of the child and takes the bed nest, puts it in the freezer, and proceeds to open the window blinds as his eyes begin to change. The old man tries to warn Tom about the impending danger, asking him to open the door. Before Tom knows what is happening, he's knocked out by Gary. Gary goes up to the old man and opens the door to the garage as the old man pleads with him. Gary then walks up to the ladies and starts opening the blinds. Olympia ends up staring, and she's engulfed by the entity. Her eyes begin to change, she's about to do something crazy, and Malorie has to beg her to let go of her infant. She gives her baby to Malorie, and the next thing she says is, "It really looks beautiful," before running straight to the window, crashing into it, and falling to her death. The old lady grabs a pair of scissors and tries to subdue the psycho, but she's too old for the struggle. Gary easily grabs her and forces her eyes open until she begins to turn. Finally, she uses the scissors on herself until she's dead. Next is Malorie, as she tries to get hold of her and the babies. The old man shows up with a shotgun. It turns out he isn't infected yet. Seeing this, Gary tries to persuade him to open his eyes and look into the void. Using his voice as a direction, he shoots at Gary but only hits his arm. As he tries to reload, Gary rushes and pushes him to the vent, and both of them fall to the ground. Gary stabs the old man with the scissors, killing him. At the same time, Tom wakes up and manages to grab the gun. 2 gunshots are heard and thankfully, it was Tom doing the shooting. Back in the present 5 years later, before the journey across the river, Malorie is seen teaching the kids how to survive using sound, since in the new world, using your eyes means death. Tom keeps trying the radio to see if there's an asylum for survivors. To survive, they must go out while being blindfolded to some abandoned buildings to find food and supplies. Malorie hears 2 cars approaching and readies her gun, then rushes back home. Thankfully, they don't notice her and drive away. Malorie tells Tom about her encounter, so they both agree not to go hunting alone. The next morning, they receive a radio message telling them about a place where they've created a community with enough supplies. The man introduces himself as Rick, asking if they have kids, because traveling by road would be riskier. It would be much faster and easier to travel by the river, considering that the shelter is at the end of the river. He also says that since there are 4 of them, one of them would have to volunteer to look without a blindfold, because at some point, the river would get bumpy, and one of them would have to navigate. He tells them to follow the sounds of the birds, which means they are closer. Tom tells the kids a bedtime story about outdoor activities, like climbing trees and flying, to cheer them up. Malorie doesn't like the idea of telling the kids such a story, saying what they need now is to know how to survive and not even get a glimpse of the sky. Tom doesn't like the idea of the kids being told how to survive and points out that she isn't being a mother to them, calling them girl and boy. Because she hasn't been able to come up with a name, Malorie gets angry, saying everything she's done so far was for their survival. The next day, the whole family goes out to look for food and supplies inside an abandoned building. They find lots of things they could use, even getting a biscuit. She gives it to the kids, telling them that it's strawberry, and the couple laughs about it. Unfortunately, the happy moment is cut short by a psycho who shoots at the building, asking them to come outside if they want to live. Tom tells Malorie to take the kids through the back door while he faces them. If he doesn't get back home in the next 15 minutes, she should take the kids with her on the boat and move to the shelter. Malorie doesn't want to go along with the plan because she's scared but agrees after much persuasion. Tom goes out to meet them, and they are not wearing any blindfolds. They ask him to do the same, to remove his blindfold so he can be like one of them and move freely. However, one of them finds Malorie and the kids anyway, and Tom shoots him. He starts to shoot the rest, and one of them retaliates, shooting back and hitting him on the arm. He crawls to hide. Seeing his blindfold on the floor thinking he has turned, Tom surprises them with an attack from behind because now he can see clearly. One of them is still alive and is after Malorie and the kids. Suddenly the presence begins talking to Tom, and his eyes begins to change. But before he completely loses his mind, he struggles to kill the last guy before self-deleting. Malorie takes a moment to mourn the death of Tom before embarking on the journey. In few hours, they will approach the rapids, meaning one of the kids would have to look and direct her on which direction to navigate. She takes a blanket to cover themselves so they can remove their blindfolds and have a chat. Her son volunteers to look, but she refuses. She wants the adopted daughter, Olympia's child, to look, but she remembers the promise she made to her mom and changes her mind. She concludes that no one has to look, and she will try her best to see that they make it through the rocky terrain. Moments before the disaster, everything is going smoothly until, of course, without clear vision and control, the boat capsizes. Malorie keeps calling out to the kids, scared that she's lost them. Fortunately, she hears Boy calling out to her while hanging onto a rock. Girl, on the other hand, keeps ringing a bicycle bell that was given to her, making it easier for Malorie to locate her by following the direction of the sound. She checks the little box that contains the little birds and thankfully they're still alive. Left with no other choice, they continue the journey on foot into the woods. There, the presence keeps talking to her, making her hallucinate. She begins to panic and starts to run until she trips and falls unconscious. The kid, scared and alone, keeps calling her name, but she's still unconscious. The kid starts to wander around, and the presence takes advantage of that by using Malorie's voice to talk to the kids, asking them to take off their blindfolds. Malorie finally wakes up and starts looking around for the kids by calling out their names. She tells them not to listen to any voice telling them to take off their blindfolds, and to only concentrate on hers. The boy is able to ring his bell until she finds him, but the girl is still missing and doesn't want to come back. The boy reveals that she's afraid of her, and Malorie tries to calm her by finishing Tom's story about a beautiful place where there are a lot of kids and toys to play with. Hearing this, the girl gently walks up to her, and Malorie embraces her kids. As they continue their journey, the presence keeps tormenting them by asking them to remove their blindfolds so they can be free. Malorie can't stand it anymore, so she carries the kids in her arms and runs through the forest, while the creature, which travels by air, keeps trailing them. Following the voice of the birds, she comes across a shelter. She begins to knock, and finally, the door is opened for her and the kids. She's asked to take off her blindfold because she's safe now, looking at the writing on the wall which indicates that this was a school for the blind that has now turned into a shelter for survivors. Rick is their leader, so he welcomes them and introduces them to the community, assuring her that they have enough supplies to go around. Now safe, Malorie tells the kids they need to set the birds free to join other birds in the sky while they join the other kids to play. And the movie ends. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more.